one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, September 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 14 degrees, 15 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Well, breaking news this morning from Buckingham Palace. Queen Elizabeth II under medical supervision. Buckingham Palace announcing that doctors are concerned about the health of the 96-year-old monarch as relatives head to Scotland. We get the latest from City News reporter Laura Carney.
The concern for the 96-year-old monarch's health comes after an evaluation this morning. A statement from Buckingham Palace says following further evaluation, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen, they say, remains comfortable and at Balmoral. Now, last night, the monarch postponed her Privy Council meeting after being advised by doctors to rest. This type of statement from the palace regarding the Queen's health is rare. And we also know that Prince Charles is by her side, while Prince William is currently traveling to Balmoral, which is also concerning, according to journalist and author Stephen Bates, speaking with the BBC.
Yes, and that's another indication that things are getting serious. Under normal circumstances, the royal family have stiff upper lips and don't tend to visit each other when they're ill. So one wonders about the significance of that.
The Queen has been largely out of the public eye recently, suffering from mobility issues. Prime Minister Liz Truss, who was just appointed by the Queen at Balmoral on Tuesday, has released a statement. She says the whole country is deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace and adds her thoughts and the thoughts of people across the United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. Laura Carney, City News.
City News time 9:02. Also breaking news from the court in Wisconsin. A judge has ruled in favor of an Indigenous band in its dispute with Enbridge over Line 5 pipeline. The decision does not shut down this cross-border oil and gas link, but the judge acknowledged such an order would have serious foreign policy ramifications for both Canada and the United States. The decision, though, does give the Bad River Band, which wants the pipeline removed from its territory, financial compensation. The judge also ordering Enbridge to reroute that pipeline around Bad River territory within 5 years. The company says that is already underway. Now your forecast, here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Overall, we're in for a really nice day. Plenty of sunshine. May have some fog to start, but overall great conditions. 28 degrees will feel like 31. Clear tonight near 14, and tomorrow sunshine, 29 degrees will feel like 33. For today, the high, 28.
And right now it's 14 degrees in Ottawa, 15 degrees in Smiths Falls. The chief of a Saskatchewan First Nation set to speak the day after the suspect in a deadly stabbing rampage died in police custody, ending a 4-day manhunt.
Miles Sanderson went into medical distress and died shortly after being arrested Wednesday. He was wanted on charges including first-degree murder after attacks that left 10 people dead and 18 injured on Sunday. Most of the victims were from the James Smith Cree Nation, and the community has been on edge and in grief since the stabbings. Chief Wally Burns is scheduled to speak in the community this morning. He'll be joined by other First Nations leaders, representatives of the RCMP, and federal ministers. Kelly Malone, The Canadian Press, James Smith Cree Nation.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Say X,
he's got the Y.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
The Queen has lived long, and long live the Queen. We are following that story very closely this morning here at City News. Doctors concerned for Her Majesty's health, and like me, I'm sure many of you are as well. Especially with word the family has traveled to Balmoral to be by her side. Said to be comfortable and resting. And that is about all we know at this time. Stay with us for any developments on that story. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Coming up, Post Media columnist and author Randall Denley. Randall covers the Ford government for the National Post, and he covers city issues for the Ottawa Citizen, and we'll touch on both areas this morning. There's the ongoing controversy in the aftermath of Bill 7 at Queen's Park, the hospital/long-term care bill. There's also the guidance recently issued about COVID-19 from the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Moore. Some people are still questioning the wisdom of that with the start of the school year and colder weather inevitably on the way. Cover off both of those issues and then talk a little bit about the mayor's race here in Ottawa this morning. And in particular, this campaign pledge from Councillor McKenney yesterday to have the city borrow $250 million. $250 million to build a citywide network of bike lanes. $250 million. And the councillor says the vision is to build 25 years worth of cycling infrastructure in one term of council. So in the next 4 years. Some love it, think it's bold and ambitious and just the kind of policy needed in a city that has declared a climate emergency, while others are not so enthusiastic and think it's kind of nutty. And they are questioning the councillor's priorities. A network of bike lanes. That's what you want to spend $250 million on? More bike lanes? A common comment on social media since this hit the interwebs yesterday. So all of that is in the mix. Randall Denley, minutes from now. And from there, we will roll into Ontario politics this week with our political analysts. And today we'll mix in some federal politics because we're getting so close. Oh, so close. Set your PVRs. Saturday. The grand finale of the Conservative Party's leadership race. That will be the weekend show for political junkies Saturday. How will it all unfold? Is it going to be easy peasy lemon squeezy for Pierre Poilievre? One round and that's it, that's all. It's over and he's the new Conservative leader and leader of the opposition? Or does it drag on? Does it go the distance? And if it drags on and goes the distance, I mean, does that actually mean Jean Charest has a path to victory? Okay, I'm trying to build up some drama here, you know? But if the Conservatives, under Pierre Poilievre or any other leader, are to ever have any chance of ever forming government again, the party has to perform better with voters in Ontario. When Stephen Harper won his only majority government back in 2011, the Conservatives won 73 seats in Ontario. But that was more than a decade ago. And the party has barely managed to win half that number of seats in the last 3 elections. Won 37 seats in Ontario last time out. In the meantime, there would seem to be a template. Ford Nation. Somehow, Doug Ford managed to win an 83-seat majority government, and you would think Team Poilievre or whoever the leader is after Saturday would love to duplicate that kind of success in Ontario. How come Doug Ford can win so big in Ontario and the federal Conservatives can't seem to manage it? So that's going to be a topic of conversation for us this morning. In addition to that, there is another interesting race for mayor in Ontario outside of our own here in Ottawa, and that is the race for mayor in Brampton. Big write-up about that in the Toronto Star this morning. A whole bunch of political heavy hitters from across the political spectrum are going to try and take out Patrick Brown, the current mayor of Brampton, and one-time candidate in the Conservative Party leadership race. You remember he was kicked out for irregularities. So Ontario politics this week coming up right after the 9:30 news. As well today, the world with Professor Elliot Tepper, from the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University here in Ottawa. For many months, if you've been paying attention, you have heard Professor talk about the two great divides in the world, democracy and authoritarianism. The authoritarianism of Russia and China, the democracy as represented by the United States. And much has been written and talked about recently about the threat to American democracy. President Biden delivered a speech last week in Philadelphia claiming democracy in America is under assault, that much of what is happening in the United States right now is not normal, and that Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of the American Republic. So we'll ask the professor, is that kind of speech overdone, or is it spot on? And we'll get his take on the race for the midterms in the United States. You know, a few months ago, it seemed as though the Democrats were headed for a crushing defeat in the midterms. But now pollsters are singing a different tune, and they're pointing to the ruling on Roe v. Wade as a major turning point that really energized female voters in the United States. There was also the recent student loan relief package, but also all of Trump's troubles, from the January 6th committee hearings to the material seized at his estate, Mar-a-Lago. So we'll get into all of that with the world with Professor Elliot Tepper coming up at 11:30 this morning on the Rob Snow Show. In between all of that, there's the Talkback Hour as we continue, as we've been doing this week, discussing how Ottawa can be more livable. We do the Talkback Hour every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. We take an issue, we kick it around for a while. It's not rocket science. Our call-in line is 750-1310, 750-1310. After the 10 o'clock news, 613-750-1310. This morning, the focus will be the environment and climate change. You know, this region has had its fill of extreme weather events in recent years. Floods, tornadoes, more floods, worse than the floods that came before. And just a few months ago, the Derico, that wicked storm back in the third week of May. Many residents are still cleaning up after that. The city has a very ambitious and expensive plan to fight climate change and get to net zero. A plan that includes very aggressive targets to reduce the city's output of greenhouse gas emissions. You look at what the city's been doing, the big money purchase of a fleet of electric buses. We have a candidate for mayor, as mentioned, Councillor McKenney, promising $250 million of borrowed money for bike lanes over the next 4 years. All told, to get to net zero in Ottawa, according to the city's own estimate, would cost more than $57 billion in a city of 1 million people. These are some of the most ambitious and expensive plans to fight climate change of any municipality in the country. But will it make Ottawa more livable? Have your say after the 10 o'clock news on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Here with author and post-media columnist Randall Denley. Good morning.
Morning, Rob.
Let's start with healthcare here in the province of Ontario. We've had Bill 7 passed now, and comments from the Premier, the Health Minister. The status quo is not working when it comes to healthcare in Ontario. What have you thought of the reaction to both?
It's, I think, both predictable and discouraging, Rob. You know, anything that changes the status quo sets off a whole bunch of public health defenders who, you know, on the one hand, surely must realize that it isn't working, except there's no change to it that they would find acceptable, except maybe doubling the amount of money, which isn't going to do anything because the real problem we have is, you know, we're short of people. That's the issue, and that's the issue that the Conservatives are trying to deal with. But you get the predictable stuff, and from the NDP in particular, you know, this is terrible. We're going to move some seniors who are stuck in hospital and give them priority, really, to get them into long-term care. Nightmare. They're going to be dragged kicking and screaming from a hospital bed where they can't be properly served to a long-term care home where they can be better served. Can you imagine anything worse? It's just, it's very difficult, I think, to really come to grips with the kind of problems that we have in Ontario in regard to health care, because there's such a strong lobby for the status quo. And if they think the status quo is so great, well, tell us what they would do to make it work, because it just doesn't right now.
Okay, what have you thought? I mean, it's one thing to pass Bill 7, and it's another thing to say the status quo is not working, but what have you thought about the action or lack of action from the Ford government on innovating the healthcare system?
Yeah, we haven't seen much there, and I don't know that we will. It's a nice talking point. You know, we're challenging the status quo, but there's really nothing in this change that challenges the status quo other than to improve some administrative procedures, basically. And, you know, there's an allusion to, you know, maybe more surgeries in privately owned clinics, which, of course, you know, sets off the usual howls of protest because of the word private. But it's very nonspecific, and it's not the first time they said it, and they already do it. There's already, you know, for example, cataract surgeries are performed in private clinics, and OHIP pays for them. Not the whole bill that you might face, but they pay the OHIP part of that. So I'm not sure what we're really going to see there, but if they were serious about it, what they should have said is, look, we see a certain percentage of surgeries in Ontario in these fields being done outside of hospitals because we don't have the capacity in the hospitals to do them. So doctors, you know, say 6 orthopedic surgeons in Ottawa, you want to get together, start a clinic, you can find staff, you can do surgery, we are going to send you patients. You're going to be able to do it. Now, that would actually make a change by increasing capacity, but just to, you know, allude to it as a thing you're not against, it doesn't really do anything, you know. And if you're going to attack the status quo, you better have something to supplant it with. And really what I saw in that legislation was just some minor tweaking. And there's no doubt that they were under pressure to do something, because while this thing has gone off the rails completely over the summer, the Ford government's just kind of slept through it. You know, everybody was talking about it. They weren't really saying anything about it, doing anything about it. So it was important for them, I think, to be seen to have a plan, do something, even if the plan is basically the same plan they had back in March, slightly warmed over.
Okay, on that delivery model, a private clinic but single payer, do you get the sense that the aversion to that kind of delivery model, we're getting over that in Ontario now?
Well, I think the public's over it.
Yeah.
So the people who aren't over it are the diehard ideological protectors of government must provide your health care, and certainly the public health unions are not over it, and they're very disturbed, for example, by the fact that, you know, a lot of nurses now work for agencies, so they're not working as union members, and they're making more money than union members. So I can see why that would be perturbing, but these are people making decisions about their own life, and they're making good decisions for them, I think, in terms of their pay and their working hours. But if you're somebody who believes that government should control every aspect of healthcare, how much is spent, the volume of surgery, of service, who delivers it, everything has to be controlled by government. I mean, that is an unusual model. Pretty well every other advanced Western country has a much more robust private sector than we do. And yet, we'll go to a blood clinic or get an x-ray. And these are almost exclusively private sector things. Does anybody complain? Do you see demonstrations outside the x-ray clinic? I don't think so. But we're just locked into this idea that, we have exactly somehow the perfect balance. But if we added anything more, the whole system would fall apart. That really doesn't make sense to me.
Your thoughts, please, on Dr. Moore's latest guidance on COVID-19.
Yeah, I think he had that right.
Okay.
It's interesting how much criticism he's getting for saying, look, we've reached a point where we can be relatively normal in how we conduct ourselves. I mean, use your head if you're sick, stay home, wear a mask, but we're not having a mandatory COVID quarantine time. Now, you'd wonder, how was it ever being enforced anyway? If I had COVID, I may or may not know I've had it. I might think I had a flu, or if I said, I've had it, but I'm not going to get paid if I don't go to work, I'm going to work. But we never know or do anything about it. So in a sense, it's a reflection of, I think, reality on the ground, that people just aren't following these rules anyways. But it's just, we have to reach a point, Rob, where this is not over, but we have to say, we have to live with what there is. And I think that's what Dr. Moore is saying. Looking at the whole picture, the risk of the changes he's imposing is not, in his mind, sufficient to say, we shouldn't do that. And I know not everybody agrees with that, and some of them are experts, and it's always going to be that way. But just because somebody is worried, that doesn't mean society should say, we better all go with, as worried as we can be, and just sort of stay in COVID limbo forever. And I think, particularly, not enough attention is being paid to the fact that, in the fall, we're going to have a much better vaccine available that actually does more to address the Omicron variant than what we've had so far. So we're in good vaccine shape now. It's going to get better. So if you weren't going to loosen up then, when would you ever do it, really?
Okay. Let me quote from this statement from Councillor McKenney. As mayor, I will transform Ottawa into one of the best cities in the world for cycling. We'll do this by building 25 years worth of bike infrastructure in 4 years, using green bonds to bring forward money that we would otherwise spend on cycling infrastructure in the future for a cost-neutral way to cover this transformative investment in our city's quality of life. Your thoughts on $250 million in debt-financed bike infrastructure?
Well, there's an ambitious downtown point of view, isn't it? I have to give McKenney some credit. This is something very important to her, and she's come forward with a substantive proposal on it. And I appreciate that. If you think that's important, then say how much you're going to do and how much it's going to cost. So I give the candidate full marks for that. It's just hard to think this is on anybody's top 10 list outside the core, though, because the idea we're going to make Ottawa one of the best cycling cities in the world. Other places are like miles and miles ahead of us already, and particularly, of course, places that have a much more temperate climate than we do, where cycling is a 12 months of the year thing. I know some people cycle here in the winter, but most people don't. So it's a good thing to do when the weather's appropriate. But sort of from November to probably April, cycling in Ottawa is not a very pleasant experience or very practical. So we still need the roads and the public transit to get people from A to B, because cycling is just never going to fill that gap. in our climate. It's a big amount of money, and I think it's great to talk about a green bond and it's, cost neutral and so forth, but it's just a fancy way to say cycling's so important, we're going to borrow $250 million so we can do a tremendous amount of expansion of cycling lanes, cycling paths, all that kind of stuff. Now, whether that's even something that can be accomplished in that period of time, I don't know. She probably doesn't know either, but it's a good sounding promise for the the people who will vote for a progressive candidate for mayor, and Catherine McKinney is certainly that candidate. So it's something I would expect her to say. It's not something that attracts me personally, but I think it will attract McKinney's voter base. So she's on the right track, at least in a political sense, but I don't see it as a big priority for Ottawa, and particularly you're going to have to contrast that against the state of our roads. And I don't think Catherine McKinney is going to be somebody, demands big spending on better roads. That's just not where McKinney's coming from. So everybody uses the roads, really. Either they use them directly, they use them in a bus, stuff that they buy in stores comes to them on roads. The roads are critical infrastructure. Cycling, to me, is nice to have infrastructure.
Okay.
I don't think you can ignore critical infrastructure to say, let's pour a bunch of money, because wouldn't it be great if we had more cycle lanes? I just don't know how you get that to be a priority in your mind unless you are Catherine McKinney.
Okay. Thank you, Randall Denley.
Okay, Rob.
Speak next week. Bye-bye. Actually, Randall's away next week, so the week after that, Randall will be back with us. Randall Denley, post-media columnist and author. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, September 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, 17 degrees in Ottawa, 18 degrees in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news this hour. Queen Elizabeth II is under medical supervision now at her summer home at Balmoral, Scotland. Doctors are concerned for the health of the 96-year-old monarch. Prince Charles and Camilla arrived at the Queen's summer residence shortly after word of her medical condition was released to the public. Prince William and Prince Harry family are also headed to the Scottish royal residence. A 4-day manhunt in Saskatchewan is over. The suspect in the murder of 10 and wounding of 18 others in a couple of communities ended with his death. Miles Sanderson was tracked down while he was in a stolen vehicle and rammed by police. He was taken to hospital in medical distress and pronounced dead there. A judge in Wisconsin has ruled with an Indigenous ban, but has not stopped the Line 5 oil and gas pipeline from running through that ban's territory. The judge ruled the ban should be compensated, but also ordered Enbridge to reroute Line 5 around the Bad River territory within the next 5 years. The company says that work is already underway. City News Time 9:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Time for Ontario politics this week. Lindsay Maskell is back. Liberal strategist, former advisor to Premier McGuinty. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Lindsay Maskell, great to hear from you, along with Andrew Brander, Vice President, Crestview Strategy, former advisor to the Ford government. Good morning, Andrew Brander.
Hi, Rob.
Great to hear from both of you this week. Let's jump right into it. Mixing in some federal politics since we're getting so close to the end of the Conservative Party of Canada's leadership race. Saturday. Pierre Poilievre is widely expected to win, in case you haven't heard. Let me ask you this. In the recent provincial election, the Doug Ford PCs won 83 seats. When you look back over the last 4 federal elections, this is how the federal Conservative Party has performed in the province of Ontario. 2011, the Big Harper majority, 73 seats. 2015, 33 seats. 2019, 36 seats. 2021, 37 seats. Opinion polls suggest Poilievre is really not that popular with Ontario voters, and I'm sure if it's him, his team would love to tap into some of that Ford Nation magic. Andrew Brander, where should they start?
They have work to do, quite frankly. However, I'd always caveat these public opinion polls in saying there's always more than meets the eye. Okay. You'll recall in the last 2 elections federally, the Conservatives won the popular vote. That didn't translate into seats. The last election turnout was only 62%. So if you're to believe these claims from the Pierre Poilievre campaign, they seem to have signed up about half of the membership. The new membership, they of course have some support from the existing membership as well. But the big question going into this was, would those people who were not involved in the party before turn out? It seems, based on the turnout numbers that we're starting to see, that they are. And this demonstrates, I think, Pierre's ability to motivate people in a way that other Conservative leaders have failed to do before. And turnout will make all the difference in these close ridings. So I think what I'll be watching for very carefully on Saturday is to see which ridings turn out for Pierre and which ones he won based on the highest amount of memberships. Coming back to your question, though, more specifically in terms of what he can learn from Ford, more than focusing on any specific voter class or issue, I take is to define himself early and make sure it's authentic. I'd anticipate in the coming weeks the Liberals are going to jump all over Pierre and try to define him. He needs to make sure that he gets there fast, because people in Ontario gave the Premier a very big break on not getting things right over the course of his first mandate, and they rewarded him with the majority because they felt he was trying his best and that it was authentic. And you know, Lindsay and her colleagues are going to be gathering here this weekend in Toronto to discuss what went wrong for them. So, I'd be happy to offer my feedback and my perspective on that.
Okay. I'm sure Lindsay would love to hear that. Lindsay would love to hear that. Okay. But before we get to that,
sure.
let's just get to Lindsay. Let's just get to Lindsay and get some ideas from her on Pierre Poilievre tapping into some of that Doug Ford magic and getting the Conservative Party competitive again in Ontario. What would be some ideas?
Well, he has such an uphill battle, especially because he actually is a very well-known quantity in Ontario in terms of, how does somebody define him? He has had a huge amount of social media presence over the last year and a half with his little videos. But of course, there is a bit of a legacy that follows him from his time in the Harper government. And the one group that is very alive and well with is, of course, the biggest group that supported Doug Ford and helped with the majority, which is working class union members of the trade unions and private sector unions. And those people have were organizing, some of them were organizing for Patrick Brown. So they are very alive to the fact that Pierre Poilievre has been very anti-union, part of the Harper government that brought in 2 major anti-union pieces of legislation, and they're very aware of that. So although he may try to speak some of the same language, he doesn't have a great track record to start with, whereas what worked for Doug Ford was, of course, an initial perception, a couple of missteps, and then a major correction of working with unions, working with labor, addressing the issues at hand of labor shortages in a proactive way. So I really don't see, with the 10 years of history with the Harper government and all of the anti-labor, anti-union rhetoric that Pierre has spouted over the years, he has a big uphill climb in Ontario. Okay. And I actually don't know a good way around that for him, other than the fact of that he continues to feed off people
because that would be
their anger.
It would seem to me, Lindsay, that would be one of the obvious avenues to explore. Can the federal Conservatives do what Monty McNaughton managed to do in Ontario and forge those alliances with primarily private sector trade unions in order to get blue-collar and working class voters on side? And you don't think it could happen?
No, he's done a real, they've
No?
done, the Ford government and Monty did their work on that. They've done, a good job with actual regulation, COVID safety measures, everything that the labor movement needed through the pandemic, and ending some things that they did initially that seemed anti-labor. So they saw that work. So it would have to be a real reversal, and then they'd have to, people would have to actually believe it, which wouldn't be authentic after multiple years of the anti-labor, anti-union rhetoric from Pierre.
What do you think about that, Andrew?
Look, I
wooing
think,
the union vote.
I think Aaron O'Toole tried to do that quite extensively, and I would suggest obviously it didn't necessarily pay off, and it didn't seem to pave a path where the Conservatives were viable. I go back to my main point that I do think Pierre has to be authentic in his beliefs, and I'd agree that the history and the voting record certainly will leave a lot of question marks that need to be addressed, but that can't compromise his authenticity. I think his entire campaign has been speaking to people's plights. And while that might not be found with the leadership of the unions, I think that is found among among the workers, understanding their struggles, whether those be economic, social, or otherwise. And so I think, the advice and counsel that I would provide would probably go against what many pundits have been saying is going to be some kind of big repositioning coming from Pierre's campaign after. I don't think he can do that. There's going to be no pivot coming from Pierre's campaign going forward that will lead to a path for victory. So he needs to keep speaking authentically to the problems and try and make that connection with the workers. And contrast that with the Liberals, who, for example, we saw the Deputy Prime Minister respond to historic interest rate hike again by talking about how Canadians are working real hard. So I really think that he needs to keep talking to the problems and try and make the connection with the workers.
Okay. By some accounts, Patrick Brown's campaign for the leadership signed up 150,000 members. What do you think is going to happen to those votes? Do you think are they in play? Could they be a factor? What do you think is going to happen there, Andrew? What do you think? Yeah.
So the Conservatives released some numbers first thing this morning, talking about how 437,000 ballots were received by the deadline. 417,000 of those have been accepted and will be counted. This number does not account, though, for ballots that were cast for Patrick Brown. They haven't actually started opening the envelopes yet, or at least I guess they did this morning at 8 a.m. But this is one of the big question marks. In the event that Patrick's supporters marked one and only choice, and that being Patrick, the number in the spoiled ballots is gonna shoot up. However, if they did mark a second choice, likely being Charest, then I think that he will get you'll see those numbers reflected in the first round, and I think his numbers, especially in provinces like Ontario, are going to appear to be stronger than they actually are. Because of those spoiled ballots. In the end, no, I don't think it's going to make a difference. I'd anticipate a large amount of Patrick's supporters didn't even bother returning their ballots. But I truly think that this is going to be a decisive win, and I think it's going to be over on the first ballot.
Okay, all right. Do you agree with that analysis, Lindsay?
Yes, but I do think it'll be interesting in this when we look at the numbers in Ontario, because they did a good job. Brown and Charest's campaign having worked together, I do know from seeing some communications that went to people who had memberships that to not just mark one person on the ballot, to if they signed up for Patrick Brown, to also mark Charest as their number two. So it'll be interesting to see those numbers and if that instruction worked, and I'm quite curious to see that, because that will tell a lot in Ontario.
Okay, when we come back, a little bit more on Patrick Brown, not his impact on the Conservative Party leadership race, but rather his re-election bid as Mayor of Brampton. When we come back, Ontario politics this week on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
949. And again, we continue to follow any developments out of the UK and the health of the Queen. Rebecca English just tweeted to summarize all of the Queen's children, Charles, Anne, Edward, Andrew, are either at the Queen's bedside or traveling to be with her. Her grandson, Prince William, is also in Scotland. This is as grave as it gets, I am sorry to say, says the royal editor of the Daily Mail in London. So we were watching this. 10 minutes to 10. Rob Snow Show, City News. Ontario politics this week. Talking about Patrick Brown. A big story in the Toronto Star today from Robert Benzie. Quote, Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown, one of the best-known politicians in Canada, is facing off against 5 rivals, but the mayoral challenger generating the most buzz at Queen's Park and beyond, Nikki Cower. Anybody know? Does anybody know? Is that how you say it? Cower?
I say Carr.
Carr? Okay.
Yeah,
Carr.
I've heard people
say
like Carr, but I'm not 100% sure that's correct. But that's
lawyer. This is what happens when you only get your information from the print media. A lawyer and municipal employee fired and then reinstated after raising allegations of wrongdoing at Brampton City Hall. That's because key political strategists behind Premier Doug Ford, Toronto Mayor John Tory, Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie, and former Premier Dalton McGuinty have joined forces to help her. Nick Cavalis, polling wizard, instrumental in Ford's re-election, has teamed up with Marcel Wider, the mastermind behind the Working Families Coalition of Unions that helped the Liberals win 4 straight provincial elections to try and unseat the incumbent. Brown enjoys a massive lead over all his rivals in the publicly available polls and his unparalleled name recognition in Brampton. Said he has widespread support from across the political spectrum. So, very interesting. Race for mayor in the GTA, high-profile incumbent. You were recently involved in some campaigning, Andrew, and said he's a rock star down there. Is this a serious challenge? Is Brown going down in Brampton? What's going on?
Well, look, you said it's interesting. Certainly going to be the most interesting municipal election to watch in the province, if not certainly in the GTA, after we talked last week about how boring Toronto is. Look, I know Nick and Marcel well. I believe they are both exceptional political operatives. I'll admit, when reading this piece, it gave me some real David versus Goliath vibes. But no one, look, Patrick is the rock star in Brampton. I'll say it again. No one will want this more than him. He's kept a team in place that was positioned well enough to likely lead to a second place or result in a national leadership. That team is now localized squarely in Brampton. He has been working nonstop since the end of his leadership race, and I don't think there's enough runway for any challenger, even with a team of heavy hitters, to make up the difference. Okay. I think Patrick's strategy will be to get these ballots in the box early. So I'm looking for historically higher voter turnout in the advanced polls. If those numbers are as high as I think they'll be, then that's going to be a guaranteed win for Patrick.
What do you think, Lindsay?
Well, I have been watching this one very closely. It's interesting because there is a bit of the grudge match sort of feeling here, in the sense that, Patrick Brown beat Linda Jeffrey, Marcel Wider did Linda Jeffrey's campaigns, of course, the Cavalis versus Brown team. But, again, these are people who jump in on lots of interesting campaigns all the time. So they can say it's not that there's no payback here. But so I've been watching closely to see what what Nikki's been coming out with, because she's, of course, she's a woman of very high integrity, very smart. I think I can say that she's very attractive. She has all the makings of a fantastic candidate. Okay. But Patrick Brown is just so well known, and it was just the runway room, and really Nikki had a good moment of media attention around her case, but I don't know if it will be enough to break through this cycle. But I really hope if she's not successful, she's somebody whose name will be on a ballot again, because she's a very interesting, very capable, bright person. So I really think, especially, it'll be interesting to see the vote splitting in the South Asian community, right, with the other candidates as well. So this one is really one of the most interesting campaign.
It's the one to watch, you're saying.
This is the one to watch.
Way more interesting than a boring race in Toronto.
There is no race in Toronto, but it is juicy in Brampton.
Yeah, okay. All right. We have, 2.5 minutes here. Okay. So we have the education minister, Mr. Lecce. He continues about normal school year, stable, enjoyable school year. Students will be in the classroom until the end of June, even if there are a spike in COVID-19 infections. There could be some kind of labor action from education workers. I guess my question for you is, how sympathetic do you think the public would be for striking education workers? If they're on the picket line and they're walking around, are people going to be honking horns when they drive by? What do you think, Andrew? I think there would be a lot of backlash, Andrew.
I think so.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the government is any more happy about the week that they've had, at least from the perspective of this file. Of course, when you have another staffing crisis that is distracting people, it's sometimes hard to focus on more than one. But even 3 months ago, I'd have anticipated the entire week was going to be dominated by questions around how long school lasts. The minister is an extremely proficient communicator. The preconditioning and the messaging on this commitment to keep kids in school uninterrupted until June has resonated with people, and I really don't think there would be any sympathy for any kind of labor action.
Okay. Solidarity with education workers. What do you think in the public, Lindsay?
I'm surprised that there isn't more. We need in addition to a rage index, we should have a sympathetic index.
Okay, all right.
Because we just went through 2 years of parents learning what teachers do with their day and how difficult it is, and taking on that role. So I am surprised that there has not been an increase in respect and value for our teachers in what they did to try to hold things together through the pandemic and online learning, and parents really getting a sense of that. But of course, their biggest thing is, of course, they do know they need their kids in school, that socialization, that benefit. But I'm surprised we're not, as a public, more sympathetic to teachers and to education workers who were doing all of their best to keep kids in school as long as they could, and they are very underpaid.
Okay. Great discussion this morning. Thank you so much to the both of you. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye. Andrew Brander, Lindsay Maskell, that's Ontario Politics This Week. The Talk Back Hour is next, right after the 10 o'clock news at 750-1310 on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, September 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 18 degrees, 17 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The Queen's immediate family is with her now at Balmoral Castle in Scotland after doctors reported Her Majesty was under medical supervision. With the latest, here's City News reporter Irene Precklett.
All the Queen's 4 children are now with her at Balmoral Castle, along with her grandson, Prince William. His wife, Kate, did not travel there, instead staying with their children at home. Raising alarm bells, Prince Harry and Meghan are on their way, and they've been in Europe this past week, but have shied away from the spotlight. CNN's Anna Stewart is outside Buckingham Palace and says the wording of the statement on the Queen's health has people worried.
Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable at Balmoral. The term comfortable, of course, ringing some alarm bells.
It was in February of this year the Queen contracted COVID. She suffered mild symptoms but has since scaled back her duties. She is 96 years old. In October of last year, she spent a night in hospital for what the palace called preliminary investigations, and she did not attend all of the celebrations for June's Platinum Jubilee, marking her 70 years on the throne. Irene Precklett, City News.
City News time, 10:02. Now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Overall, we're in for a really nice day. Plenty of sunshine. May have some fog to start, but overall, great conditions. 28 degrees will feel like 31. Clear tonight near 14, and tomorrow, sunshine. 29 degrees will feel like 33. For today, the high, 28.
Right now, it's 18 degrees in Ottawa, 17 in Smiths Falls. A Wisconsin judge has ruled in favor of the Bad River Band of the Lake Superior Chippewa. It's in a dispute over Enbridge and the controversial Line 5 pipeline. The district court judge ordered Enbridge to reroute that pipeline around Bad River territory within 5 years, and that band should receive some financial compensation. Today's decision, though, did stop short of shutting down that cross-border oil and gas link. The judge says an order would have serious foreign policy ramifications for both Canada and the United States. Enbridge says its plan to reroute that line is already underway. An RCMP official says the death of the 2 suspects in this week's stabbing rampage in Saskatchewan means there may never be an answer to what led to the killing of 10, the injuring of 18 others. The Assistant Commissioner, Rhonda Blackmore, says Miles Sanderson went into medical distress and died shortly after being arrested yesterday on a highway north of Saskatoon. Sanderson's brother, Damien, was found dead near one of the crime scenes earlier this week. Today, the chief of the James Smith Cree Nation, where some of those stabbings took place, is set to speak alongside other community leaders. City News time, 10:03. It's not going to help all travelers who've had to deal with delays or canceled flights during the summer, but as of today, airline passengers have more power to get refunds from the airlines for travel disruptions.
The update to the Air Passengers Bill of Rights comes as the Canadian Transportation Agency tries to close a loophole that left some passengers unable to secure cash refunds after pandemic-related flight cancellations. Starting today, airlines will be required to issue a full refund for cancellations and delays if passengers are not placed on a new flight within 48 hours, including for reasons outside of the airline's control. Previously, the Passenger Rights Bill only required refunds for flight disruptions that were within the airline's control, which excluded situations ranging from weather to war to unscheduled mechanical issues. As well as a cash refund, the ticket price may also be reimbursed through credit or vouchers and is to be paid in full by the airline within 30 days. At the City News Business Center, I'm Mike Uppel.
And I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
City of Ottawa has a very ambitious and expensive plan to fight climate change. Will it make Ottawa more livable? 750-1310. 750-1310, 613-750-1310. All this week we've been talking about how the city can make Ottawa more livable. It's the election year. Lots of people have lots of ideas. And today, let's focus on climate change and the environment. And kind of do a variation on the question. And I guess this is what I came up with on how to ask it. The city has a very ambitious plan, expensive as well, to fight climate change, get to net zero. Do you think it will make Ottawa more livable? Yes or no? Livability. We've been asking you about that all week during the Talkback Hour. What can be done to make Ottawa more livable? And the conversation's been great, very eye-opening as we've talked about things like public transit and transportation and housing policy. Got into that yesterday. Healthy debate about policing last week. So climate change, the environment this morning, making Ottawa more livable. There are some very aggressive, very expensive plans to fight climate change, but will it make Ottawa more livable? Or will it make Ottawa more unaffordable to call home, and thereby it would be less livable? Ottawa would be less livable. Or, maybe you view it this way. You know what? We can do everything we want here, and it'll make no difference at all. No difference at all what a city of 1 million residents does in the fight against climate change. So that's kind of how I want to come at the discussion this morning. City policy, city council, the next mayor, climate change in the environment. It's very important that everyone pay attention to what's being offered here. For example, you may have some comments on this. There's this plan announced yesterday by Councillor McKenney to borrow $250 million to spend on new bike lanes over the next 4 years. $250 million. Perhaps you have some thoughts on that. $250 million is still a lot of money. If I won it in the lottery, you'd never hear from me again. You could do a lot of good in this city with $250 million, don't you think? $250 million is more than the entire annual budget of Ottawa community housing, for example. You could fix up Ottawa community housing. That kind of money would go a long way to making up ground on the repair backlog for the 15,000 units in various states of disrepair at Ottawa community housing. If you're concerned at all about the drug overdose epidemic, imagine the drug treatment facilities you could build for $250 million. I'm not saying Councillor McKenney doesn't care about these issues. I'm sure they do. And I'm not saying this bike lane extravaganza is a bad idea. I'll leave that up to you, whether you think it's a bad idea or a great idea. I'm just saying it's an expensive idea. It's an expensive idea, $250 million, all borrowed money. Okay, to build 25 years of bike lanes in 4 years. Because of climate change, global warming, climate emergency, 10 years to save the world, which I guess is down to 8 years now. Clock is ticking. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Brian, you're on City News. Brian.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, good morning, Brian.
Having been a City of Ottawa resident, I can tell you one thing. City planner in Ottawa is an oxymoron. They have a distressing, I must admit, distressing record of failure.
I think we lost Brian there.
Double-decker buses.
Okay, yeah.
The green bin. It goes on and on.
All right.
This bit about climate change, there are far, far worse issues we have in this country and the City of Ottawa that need looking after, like you mentioned, housing, the drug issues. All sorts of things, real practical things. And this pie-in-the-sky climate change business, it's a joke. When Russia, China, India, most of the third world are ignoring climate change, and us in the G20 are cutting our throats, there's something seriously wrong here.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your call. Okay. Jacob in Ottawa. Jacob, good morning. You're on City News.
Climate change. I mean, like you just said before, China, they don't care about this. Honestly, climate change is a man-made climate change is an absolute hoax. And you hung up on the other guy before. I got to keep giving you fake names. You don't ever.
Why do people feel that they can call? It's really quite strange. They feel they can call and go up one side of you and down the other and say all kinds of mean and nasty things to you, and that I would want to talk to you on the telephone. Why do people think that way? And seriously, you lie to the producer, you use fake name. Like, does it have loser tattooed on your forehead? Do you have loser tattooed on your forehead? You loser? Teddy in Ottawa. Teddy.
Hello, Rob.
Yeah, hi, Teddy.
I really enjoy your show.
Thank you. Yeah. So, look, we have this very ambitious, it's also a very expensive plan to fight climate change. But will it make Ottawa more livable?
Yes, I think
so?
There's not enough of this forward-thinking planning. I mean, we've got to spend the money. Look at the transit, how much that costs. These bike lanes are a really great idea. And we have to bite the bullet at some point. If you travel around the world, there are some amazing villages set up for environmental, the 15-minute village. And we've got to start thinking this way and spend the money. That's how I feel.
Okay. $250 million. A lot of money, Teddy. It's a lot of money, right?
It is, but we've got to start somewhere. And it's very dangerous. Like, my husband bikes. We live in the country.
Okay.
But there's been so many bad accidents, deaths, etc. And it's kind of like, that movie, If You Build It, They Will Come.
Okay.
More and more people will use the bike.
Like Field of Dreams. It's like Field of Dreams. Bike Lane of Dreams.
Well, I don't want to,
Yeah.
It's expensive, but we've got to plan ahead. This city is really has a problem with planning ahead and thinking about the environment and it's not only for the environment the cost. Think of the health, both mental and physical, for more people biking. Like, there's so many.
You see a lot of benefit to it.
Yes.
To it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, but they're intangible. A lot of them are intangible. Just like the canal in the winter. People. It's such a great mental health thing to go on the canal.
Better mental health, better physical health, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Thank you, Teddy.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye. There's a fan.
Bye.
Okay. Yep. 10:13. Rob Snow Show. This is mayoral candidate McKinney. Statement released yesterday. As mayor, they will make a transformative investment in Ottawa's biking infrastructure on an ambitious 4-year time frame. This investment will create a fully connected network allowing cyclists of all ages and abilities to safely bike across the city and within their own neighborhoods too. As mayor, this is a direct quote, as mayor, I will transform Ottawa into one of the best cities in the world for cycling. We'll do this by building 25 years worth of bike infrastructure in 4 years using green bonds to bring forward money that we would otherwise spend on cycling infrastructure in the future for a cost-neutral way to cover this transformative investment in our city's quality of life. With more safe bike lanes and multi-use pathways, we're going to make it easy and safe for kids to bike to school, for all of us to get to nearby shops and services, and make it easier for the people of Ottawa to do more in moving us towards a low-carbon future. Building Ottawa's full bike network now rather than over the next 25 years is a smart fiscal move. Bike infrastructure is a strategic investment that will save the city money. By front-loading 25 years of spending into the next term of council, financed through a $250 million green bond, we will avoid future construction cost escalations. Further, as more people move around by bike, Ottawa will have less wear and tear in our streets and save on road repairs. McKinney stated their investment in cycling infrastructure would be made with the clear goal of creating an all ages and abilities network. Bikes are good for our health And for our environment, they give people an alternative to cars to help people explore a whole new side of the city. So that's kind of one aspect of, this fight against climate change and making Ottawa a more livable city. But does it make Ottawa a more livable city with those kinds of price tags? Abdar in Ottawa. Good morning. You're on City News.
Good morning. Rob Snowflake, your producer's an idiot because he keeps falling for it.
All right, we'll stop here. 10:15, Rob Snow Show, City News.
Lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Talking about the city's very ambitious and expensive plan to fight climate change. And do you think it will make Ottawa more livable? Now, this cycling plan from Councillor McKenney, the claim is it will be funded by green bonds. Don't be fooled by this gibberish about green bonds, okay? Whether the bonds are green or blue or red with pink polka dots, green bonds, they're just bonds. Okay, it's debt. And in this case, it's $250 million worth of new debt for bike lanes. Green bonds, same old thing. It's just an agreement. The municipality borrowing money, promising to repay it over a set period of time at a given interest rate. It can be all the colors of the rainbow. Okay, it's just debt. It's just debt. Now, maybe it's wise to borrow all of this money now, given the inflationary environment and what's happening with interest rates that keep going up. Maybe it will cost more to build all of this infrastructure later because of inflation. Maybe interest rates will be higher later. Maybe. I guess the big question as a voter that I would ask is, let's say $250 million falls from the sky onto the mayor's lap. What would I want the mayor to spend that money on to do the most good in the city? Bike lanes or something else? Maybe it's bike lanes for you because we have to fight climate change because it's a climate emergency. And if we don't do that, Ottawa will be unlivable. Or maybe it's something else altogether. Up next is Ruth in Canada. Ruth, you're on City News. Ruth?
Hi, Rob.
Hi,
what are we
Ruth.
supposed to do when it's more minus 40 degrees outside? Are we supposed to walk to work? Does it make sense to approve anything? We have 2 to 3 months of summer. Like, that alone just boggles my mind.
Well, there are lots of winter cyclists, and the bike lanes that we have already, they're maintained. They're maintained all year round, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, there's the odd wackadoodle in minus 40 degrees with shorts on.
Well, no, I mean, there are people who are pretty hardcore about their winter cycling, right? Not, they have all the equipment. They have snow tires on their bicycles, the big fat tires and everything else, Ruth, right?
Yeah, only in Canada.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, I don't think it's a large percentage of the population, but there are people who do cycle in the winter. So you're not a fan of this plan?
It's too much money to be spending on that for living in Canada and minus 30, minus 40 degrees sometimes in Ottawa. You screw your brains on your head.
Okay, all right, Ruth. No, okay, gotcha. Thank you. Lyle in Ottawa, you're on City News. Morning, Lyle. Nope, nothing. Nope, nothing there. Bad connection there. Colin in Canada, you're on City News. Good morning, Colin.
Hey, listen, I have no problem with putting more bike lanes in Ottawa, but do it as we naturally resurface and renew infrastructure. This notion of borrowing $250 million to specifically put in bike lanes is crazy. Ottawa's already swimming in debt. Millions, multi-millions for the library, millions for the light rail. I mean, this is not a good plan, and it's not fiscally responsible.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Rodney is in Ottawa. You're on City News. Rodney.
Good morning.
$250 million bike lane plan, and wait till you hear the price tag for the overall climate change plan to get to net zero. It's much, that makes the bike lane plan look like peanuts, Rodney, but is it making Ottawa more livable? Will it make Ottawa more livable? What do you think?
Does it make logical sense for what Ottawa needs right now for transportation?
Okay.
I'll say a capital N-O, and I'll give you another topic to work on.
Yeah, okay. All right.
That's going to be road repair.
Road repair, sure.
Put the $250 million towards road repair, save your citizens over $250 million worth of road repair, automobile repair, and decline value.
All right, Rodney. Thank you.
Everybody has tires on their vehicle.
Sure.
Those tires on the roads that we have don't last, what's warranted. Hey, you want me to give you another one? Well, I'm going to let you go.
Sure thing. Very quickly, yep.
I think I'm going to let you go on it. All right?
Okay, Rodney.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, bye-bye. Let's take this line. Sharon in Ottawa, you're on City News. Sharon.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Sharon.
Well, you got the blood pressure going again this morning.
Sorry about that.
Actually, I knew you were going to take up this topic when I first heard the announcement yesterday.
Okay.
And my first reaction is, hold on to your
You're
wallet.
like, Rob Snow's going to talk about that, I bet.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
And for what?
I'm not anti-bike lane or anything, but it's a lot of money, $250 million.
People want a bike good on them, but I live just outside the city. Okay. I can't bike to the grocery store. When my kids were younger, they couldn't bike to school.
Well, maybe if you had a bike lane, they could.
So is she going to put bike lanes outside?
All across the city, like thousands and thousands of kilometers, I guess, of bike lanes.
Well, that and the turtle.
An entire network of bike lanes.
Honestly, there's so much basic stuff that needs to be done in this city. The transit needs to be addressed, roads, but I know that's unpopular if you're sort of a downtown person. But, I mean, snow removal in the winter, there's so many jobs that the city has that they keep saying we don't have money to deal with, and yet we can afford something like this. But you're made to think, the way it's portrayed, that it's going to be at no cost to you.
No cost, yeah.
And every time they say that, like I said, I hang on to my wallet because you know it's going to be expensive. And it's just, I mean, it's a lovely pie in the sky thing.
Okay.
But it's not what the city needs right now. You mentioned, the social housing.
Okay. The claim is, look, if we do it now, if we don't do it now, it'll be more expensive later to do it. That's one thing. And it'll be better for the streets, less road repair for the streets, save on road repair for the streets, less wear and tear on the streets.
Well,
because more people will be cycling. Better for the environment, better for people's health.
With that thinking, I should go out and buy maybe a Lexus today, because if I wait a year or two, they're going to be so much more expensive.
Maybe, I suppose.
So if I can't afford it now, I can't afford it. It doesn't matter whether it's going to be a little bit cheaper now or a little bit more expensive later. It shouldn't be at the top of her priority list.
Okay.
So that's very, very concerning.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. So it's coming up to 10:27 here on the Rob Snow Show. And again, all this week we've been asking what can make Ottawa a more livable city. And today we're focusing on issues surrounding climate change and the environment and the very ambitious, maybe aspirational might be a better word when you look at some of the targets for the reduction in greenhouse gases that the city has. Ambitious, aspirational, certainly expensive, $250 million bike lane plan, $57 billion to get to net zero, according to the city's own documents. But is it necessary? Because, we have a climate crisis. Will it make Ottawa more livable? Let's pick it up on this right after the news. This is City News.
City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, September 8th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa, mainly sunny, 19. In Smith Falls, it is 20. And here's what's making news this hour. All of the Queen's children and her grandsons, Prince William and Harry, are now at Balmoral Castle in Scotland as concern for her health grows. Buckingham Palace announced earlier today that her doctors are concerned about her health and she's now under medical supervision. The palace says the 96-year-old monarch is comfortable and will stay at her vacation home in Scotland, which is where she spent the summer. And the new COVID-19 vaccine that targets the Omicron variant will be available at vaccination centres in Quebec starting today, although Quebecers will still be allowed to choose between the older generation vaccines and the new bivalent shot. And ahead of mediation next week, federal public service workers are marching to the Treasury Board offices today. The union representing the members says the march is to remind the Treasury Board president of her mandate to bargain with them in good faith. The workers are calling for a fair collective agreement that is in line with current cost of living. The march is scheduled to start at 11:45 on Spark Street, and they'll be marching all the way to 90 Elgin Street. City News time is 10:31. I am Damilola Unime. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
So again, I'm phrasing the Talkback Hour question this way. The City of Ottawa has a very ambitious plan to fight climate change. Do you think it will make Ottawa more livable? How do you answer that question? I mean, let's think about some of the recent history here in Ottawa. Events that have happened in the recent past, okay? I mean, one year it's terrible floods, the next year tornadoes. Year after that, even worse flooding. And just this year, not that long ago, epic storm. In May, a powerful storm as strong as anyone of any age can ever remember hitting Ottawa. The Derico. So, suffice to say, Ottawa's had its fair share of weather in the extreme, and the warnings never end. It's a sign of the times, a sign of things to come, the consequences of a warming world. And at City Hall, the narrative goes this way. We are not an island unto ourselves. And if we're to prevent the very worst of climate change, governments at all levels have a role to play, and that includes us here in sleepy old Ottawa, the town that fun forgot. So there's that. And to that end, the City of Ottawa, like governments all over the world, big and small, has set targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. And for the City of Ottawa, they break that down into two categories. The city has what's called corporate emissions, and those are the emissions that are produced by the city government. Running the city 24 hours a day is quite the operation, right? You have police cars and ambulances and fire trucks and snow plows and buses and heavy equipment and all the rest of it. And the emissions from all the city-owned buildings, the city's real estate portfolio. That's a big one. There's the landfill. And so the goal is, on that side of it, the goal is to reduce those operational emissions at the city level by 30% by the year 2025. Now, the year 2025 is in, like 2.5 years from now. So I would say good luck with that. Good luck. A cut of 50%, the baseline is 2012. A 50% cut in greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2030 and 100% by the year 2040. Net zero by 2040 on an operations level, okay, for the City of Ottawa. And there's obviously a big price tag attached to an endeavor like that, and I hope we can talk about what that will cost, since you'll be expected to pay for it. And then there's what the city calls community emissions, and that's just what it sounds like, emissions from the entire community, all the vehicles in Ottawa and all the homes and businesses in Ottawa, everyone in the community, everything we do in Ottawa that emits greenhouse gases. Mowing lawns, running snow blowers, whatever comes to mind for you. The goals are even more aggressive. 43% cut in those emissions, again by the year 2025. 43% cut in emissions by the year 2025. Okay, it's 2022 now, September, like 2.5 years from now. 43% cut in greenhouse gas emissions. Sure. 68% by the year 2030. Call me Mr. Doubtful. Reduction of 96% by the year 2040, and then net zero by 2050. Targets all approved by the City Council for reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, and again, all coming with a price tag of, are you ready for it, $57.4 billion. But I would remind you that we're operating under an emergency right now, not the Emergencies Act. You may have forgotten, but back in the day, 2019, your city council declared a climate emergency. It was very fashionable at the time. And this city council just couldn't resist the temptation. $57.4 billion with a B dollars in a city of 1 million people. 57.4. It's all like whatever it is, $60,000 for everyone who lives here. Like family of four, $250,000 for you. But, we have a planet to save. Now, in fairness, the city planners, bean counters, they admit in their own literature that the city can't afford $57 billion all by itself. The city doesn't have that kind of money. So a lot of these grand plans, and I mean, that's really what they are, they're grand plans, they mostly rely on funding commitments from upper levels of government. But still a big number, right? Still a big number. Gosh, if that's what it costs to get to net zero for one city of 1 million people, what would it cost to do it all across Canada? Like 2 quintillion, something like that. But hey, what they would say, you want more floods? Do you want more tornadoes? You want more biblical storms like the storm we had in May? The city is saying if the answer is no, then this is the kind of action you need. This is the kind of investment that is required here in sleepy old Ottawa. What are the costs of climate change? The May storm, the insurance claims for that are almost $900 million. One of the costliest weather events in Canadian history, top 10. And you hear the predictions all the time, events like that. Just going to become more common, more extreme because of climate change. And as a result, Ottawa will become increasingly unlivable. So over to you. We've seen the consequences of extreme weather. We've been warned that climate change is only going to make that kind of thing worse. The city has a $57 billion plan to deal with it. And one of the candidates for mayor has a $250 million 4-year bike lane plan, all designed to make Ottawa more livable in the warming world. But will it make Ottawa more livable? Gloria in Ottawa, you're on City News. Gloria.
Oh, hello, Rob. How are you doing
I'm good.
this morning?
Gloria, thank you. Yep.
Yes, I have a couple of ideas. Well, one would be, according to the City Council, these bike lanes, we have to actually build them on stilts. Otherwise, when the floods come and the rains just pour down, where are those poor bikers going to go? Okay. So they have to be built on stilts.
Okay. Right.
Not to mention that they may have forgotten that once they've built the bike lanes, they're going to have to maintain them, resurface them, and plow them every year.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They'll be part of the road operations. They'll be part of the, the transit and transportation operations for the city.
That'll be a hidden cost.
It won't even. I doubt it will be hidden.
Yeah, it'll just come under a different headline. Yep. Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about, and I wanted to call you yesterday, but your lines were jammed, housing.
Housing, yeah, sure.
Yeah, why don't we have some more conversion, right?
Okay.
Where you can convert a large house into 2 or 3 units.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
This is what they did in London.
Okay.
Many years ago, I grant you.
Yeah.
But the way houses are built in Canada today, the old ones particularly, were quite large. Mm-hmm. And it's not boarding houses, not rooming houses, but proper units, flats or apartments.
Why? What's preventing people from doing that?
I don't know. Maybe they can't get planning permission.
Okay. Yeah.
It's possible.
All right.
And with all of us, and I'm talking about myself particularly, my generation, I've thought about doing that with my own house.
Okay.
Because it is, quote, too large. And, there's all kinds of things that come up when you get older. And with the crunch on housing, the crunch on long-term care, it would make sense that if you converted a larger house and had 2 units even, that your family member or whoever is taking care of you would be able to live in one.
Okay, Gloria, thank you for your calls.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye-bye. Yep, okay. This line here, Vince in Nepean. Vince, you're on City News. Vince.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Vince.
You see, councillors like Catherine McKinney are the epitome of what's wrong with City Hall.
Why do you say that?
Well, she's running on an election for mayor,
Yeah.
and the things that she focuses on is how to spend a pile of money on where it helps the minority of people in the city.
Okay.
Now, there's all kinds of big issues in this city.
I think the councillor would say more people aren't cycling because the infrastructure's not there, and if you build the infrastructure, more people will use it. Like one of the callers said, Field of Dreams approach. Build it and they will come, you know?
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that?
Not
Okay.
all. Not
All right.
the length of the winters we have.
Okay.
Yeah, you might get about 10% more cyclists. I don't doubt that, but not significantly a lot more.
You don't think so?
Now, we have Lansdowne Park fiasco here, where they want to tear down perfectly good stands with a roof and replace them with smaller stands without a roof. You know, to serve the developer's dream of making that place nothing but a bunch of condos.
Okay.
So
yeah.
why don't politicians talk
Well, I mean, there's
about that?
more to it than that. I mean, the Civic Center needs to be replaced, too. I mean, it's been around since 1967.
I
It's
agree with
fallen
that.
apart. The roof is
the
leaking.
other
There, you
part-
know. Yeah.
But the other part, people are not focusing on. So Shirelli said he wants a moratorium on that.
Yes.
Well, that I agree with.
Okay.
Okay? Let's
Okay.
discuss this.
Yeah.
Not just let the developers run roughshod and do whatever they like.
Gotcha.
So McKinney's not talking about that. She's talking about spending a lot of money on the minority of people that it's going to help. Now, doesn't she have other issues? I'd like to hear what they are.
Well, I'm sure we
I mean,
will.
she's been in City Hall forever.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from Councillor McKinney. This is something that is obviously she cares a lot about, and it
Well, she
appeals
cares about it,
to
but it's my money.
it appeals
She
to
wants to
people
spend.
who would vote for Councillor McKinney, right?
Yeah, well, see, this is what I call...
You need some policies for the base, you know?
Well, some people get into politics to fulfill their lifelong little piece of dream that they want.
Right.
Not necessarily what benefits all.
Okay.
This is what I think Catherine McKinney is doing.
All right. Fair enough. Thank you, Vince. Out in Nepean. Paul in Canada, you're on City News. Paul.
Yeah, hi, Rob.
Hi, Paul.
Just comment on the bikes. I kind of think the main problem with that effort is I think it's fine to do that, but the weather fact is that we have 4 to 5 months of snow and freezing rain.
Yeah.
So I think as far as prioritizing things, in my opinion, what I would do is I would actually not take the $400 million for the electric buses and the 200 and whatever for these bikes. There's over $500 million, and I'd actually focus on trying to get the light rapid transit going here in Ottawa, and fixing it, right, and maybe expanding it.
Okay.
I think, and that would have a green effect as well. And the other thing is, even without the global warming concern and all that, I think pretty much any city, of Ottawa's size, we're pretty big, we're pretty spread out.
Yes.
A self-respecting city of our size has a light rapid transit system, and so we're going to need it sooner or later. I would really focus on that, and that'll have a green benefit as well.
Like if you're going to spend $250 million, put it into public transit, you're saying instead.
Yeah, well, 250 plus the 400 for the electric buses, but I would
Right.
get that fixed. And then OC Transpol's already juggling 2 infrastructures. It's the OC O-Train and the diesel buses. At this point, I wouldn't add the electric buses in. I'd see how that technology goes, because I have a feeling that's I really wouldn't. I think it's all about prioritizing and picking the lowest hanging fruit that we get the most bang out of, actually.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Be right back. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
I see the headline on BBC News right now, I have BBC News in front of me, is Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's health flight carrying 7 members of royal household due to land at Aberdeen. So that's the latest there. There's been no significant update out of Buckingham Palace or by way of any of the UK networks since the news broke this morning about the her doctors being concerned about Her Majesty. So that is a story that we are following. And also this morning it has, I've just noticed Bernard Shaw has died. Very first anchor at CNN when CNN first went on the air. You may remember that. Bernard Shaw. Great newsman. Always liked him on television. Michelle in Ottawa South. You're on City News. Michelle.
Good morning, Rob. Sorry to hear about the Queen. We're really going to lose somebody very special. Anyway, getting onto the bicycles. Today I was driving down Elgin, and Elgin is bicycle lane heaven. And out of nowhere, from between 2 buildings, off a sidewalk, comes a bicycle. Bam, right in front of me. And no helmet, no mirrors, no license, nothing. And the person was wearing a hoodie and dark pants. And, well, who are you going to call, right? I mean, I'm lucky I didn't hit him. But then it became apparent that he was under the influence of something. And so I'm stuck behind this guy on a bicycle, and I can't pass him, and the cars are piling up behind me, and I'm thinking how very dangerous this whole thing is. And then he's gone on, and he's off just as quick as he appeared. And that's not a one-off. That's happening to people all over the city all day long. And so, if we want to weigh the costs of this against the cost of that and omissions, and are we going to save the world by everybody in Ottawa having a bicycle, what would happen if I hit that guy?
Right.
He had no helmet. Right. I have a big vehicle.
Right.
His head could have been like a melon. He could have been for the rest of his life in a wheelchair, and never mind what it would have done to my mental health and everything else.
Right.
This is $250 million. The other night I watched on Rogers the rebroadcasting of the August 30th mayoral debate. And of the 10 candidates, honest to God, Rob, initially when I flipped over, I felt like I was watching improv for Saturday Night Live. I couldn't believe it.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, there was a kid there named Gregory Guevara, and he wants to build a wall around the city of Ottawa, and we'll throw our garbage over the wall.
Okay.
And I drew great laughter. It's very funny. He had Weird Al Yankovic hair, and then beside him was, and of the 10 candidates, Rob, I would say only 4 were possible people.
Right,
and that's not including Catherine McKenney, because in my opinion, she's just as nuts as the kid who was there for should have been a yuck. Rob,
yeah.
Even then, somebody in the audience stood up and asked her point blank, did you not say that you want free transit for everybody in the
yes,
city?
that was a scandal last week. Yeah.
And she looked everybody right in the face and, I never said such a thing. So then Mark Sutcliffe stands up when it's his opportunity. God bless the man for even showing up. And he reads from an article that she's written herself and contradicts the fact that, or proves that she's just lied to all of us right in the face. And that this is the quality of people we have running for us.
The claim, I guess, from the McKenney campaign is
they're nuts, Rob.
Well, the claim from the McKenney campaign is it's a process, and McKenney never meant right away that you wouldn't have free transit right away, but eventually you would have.
I watched it, and I'm telling you, had he not have said anything,
right,
then we all would have been thinking, oh gosh, good ideas. Well, listen, that's really sad. And if you're a voter in Ottawa and you're a taxpayer and you're a bicycle person who actually contributes to the tax base to pay for all of this nonsense that you might be benefiting from, you need to pay attention to who's running. I can't wait to watch last night's debates because I wasn't able to watch them in real time.
Right.
But this is very important, and the quality of people that we have out there, and even just a total lack of respect. I mean, the kid was funny, but he should have been at Yuck Yucks. He shouldn't have been there wasting time.
Right.
And they should do some mental health screening for some of those people.
All right, come on.
I'm serious.
All right, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you go on that. Okay. All right. Dave in the West End.
Hi, Rob.
Dave. Let me ask you a quick question, Dave. How old are you, Dave?
I'm 89.
89. So you can't wait for the bike lanes to come to the West End, then, Dave?
Oh, I'm sure.
Right.
I'll never get on another bicycle.
Right.
I'll never get on transport. The
OC Transpo.
OC, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the end of that.
That's the end of that. Okay.
Now, that lady you just had on,
Michelle,
she made a lot of sense, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
This pipe dream might have been possible when Ottawa was Ottawa. Ottawa is probably now the biggest city in Canada.
Well, geographically, I believe it is. Yeah, geographically.
We go out to Carleton Place, we go out to North Gore, we go out to Richmond, Ontario. Thank God we have a river, or we'd be on the other side of the river. You know?
Oh, I don't think they'd let us invade over to that side of the river, Dave, but nevertheless.
Now, Rob,
yeah.
What percentage of the population, which I understand is over $1 million, or a million
people, yeah.
What percentage ride bicycles in order and like?
Well, last time they had a figure that I saw, it was about 2%.
Imagine 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a pipe dream.
Pipe dream.
It's
okay.
a pipe dream,
All right.
and we're people like myself and probably you. That lady mentioned a few people that should have been on Yuck Yucks instead of running for office.
Yes.
So we've allowed that to happen to us, is what I'm trying to say.
We're not taking it seriously enough, in other words.
Exactly. We're not. The real people aren't getting involved anymore. Now,
no
Mark
wonder.
Sutcliffe
no
is
wonder.
A real person and has a head on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And so does poor old Bob Shirelli. You know, but I think he's had his day anyway. But people like that should be coming forward and putting their name out there so that we can look at.
Yeah, Dave. One of the issues is when you do look at what you're subjecting yourself to and all the the abuse and the hate in social media that you subject yourself to. But a conversation for another day. David in Ottawa. I want to fit in a couple of more calls here before we have to.
I never thought I'd agree a little bit with Kathleen McKinney. I still think the Birkenstock wearing, granola crunching, probably a reefer smoking hippie. But to the bike pass idea, I think everybody's thinking about it the wrong way. Like the old guy before me just said, 89 years old, the population's growing older. More and more of these people are going to be on scooters. And they're going to have really cool little scooters that can go in the snow.
Yeah,
like grocery shopping is going to be fun.
And Catherine McKinney's the one smoking the reefer. Okay. All right. What have I done to deserve this hour? My goodness gracious. Cheryl in Carleton Place. Cheryl.
Hey, how are you?
Hang in there, Cheryl. Thank you.
Sometimes it's a little funny. Got to find a little humor in it.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, okay.
So I'm pretty close to Ottawa, and I just wanted to make a comment about, one thing that I would start with or consider is now we have drive-through banks, restaurants, coffee shops, all these drive-through things where people are sitting in lines and emissions is, taking over there. That's just one thought. I'm not sure if it's a real one or not, but it's a thought. I was speaking with a relative in California last night, and I was saying to her, do you have an electric vehicle? And she's like, no, they're not popular here at all. She said, too much money. And she said with the heat wave and that, people can't even charge their vehicles. They're not allowed to charge them. And she said, we're not even allowed to use major appliances during this time. So, they've got the heat, we've got the cold. I'm not sure this is probably going to be a good way to go.
Not going to have a happy ending,
Yeah, it's not going to work for the heat or the cold in my thought, and we're going to have to start recreating and thinking of other ways, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for all your calls.
No.
And on the Talkback Hour tomorrow, of course, it'll be the Friday free-for-all. Except for that first guy who called. I don't want to hear from you anymore. You're kind of a jerk. 11 o'clock news coming up. Rob Snow Show, City News.
number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, September 8th. Good morning. I am Damilola Unime. Right now in Ottawa, mainly sunny, 19. In Smith Falls, it is 20. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We continue to monitor breaking news from the UK, where all of the Queen's children are now at Balmoral Castle in Scotland as concerns for her health grows. But it's not just the royal family that is worried. The world is watching as well, after her doctors placed her under medical supervision. With that story for you, here's City News reporter Irene Precklett.
Nowhere is the attention more focused on the Royal Watch than in Britain, where many of the TV stations have stopped regular programming to focus on this developing story. Dozens of cameras set up at both Buckingham Palace and Balmoral Castle. All the Queen's 4 children are now with her at Balmoral, along with her grandson Prince William. His wife Kate did not travel there. Even Prince Harry and Meghan are on their way. The BBC's Nicholas Witchell says there is speculation about the cause of the medical watch.
Is it merely the mobility issue? Now, let's be candid. Mobility issues don't generally end a life. So I think the suspicion, but it is only a suspicion, must be, as it has been for a number of months, that there is some underlying condition. We saw the significant weight loss that was evident in the Christmas broadcast.
The 96-year-old has canceled a number of recent public events, and she did not attend all of the celebrations for June's Platinum Jubilee, marking her 70 years on the throne. The Queen's husband, Prince Philip, died in April of last year, just 2 months before his 100th birthday. Irene Precklett, City News.
Meanwhile, the news of the Queen's health came during a debate over energy in the UK's House of Commons. The Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, interrupted MPs to make a statement.
I wish to say something about the announcement which has just been made about Her Majesty. I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment.
And the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, says the prayers of the nation are with the Queen. With the weather forecast, here is City News meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Overall, we're in for a really nice day. Plenty of sunshine. May have some fog to start, but overall, great conditions. 28 degrees will feel like 31. Clear tonight near 14, and tomorrow, sunshine. 29 degrees will feel like 33. For today, the high, 28.
City News time is 11:02. An RCMP official says the death of the 2 suspects in this week's stabbing rampage in Saskatchewan means there may never be an answer to what led to the killings of 10 people. Assistant Commissioner Rhonda Blackmore says Miles Sanderson went into medical distress and died shortly after being arrested yesterday on a highway north of Saskatoon. Sanderson's brother Damien was found dead near one of the crime scenes earlier this week. And today, the chief of the James Smith Cree Nation, where some of the stabbings took place, is set to speak alongside other community leaders. The federal government will try to ease some of the inflation pain being felt by lower-income Canadians with a temporary hike in the value of GST rebate checks. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to announce a 3-pronged plan to address affordability at the Liberal Cabinet retreat in Vancouver today.
Cabinet ministers are gathering ahead of the fall sitting of Parliament with the economy and the cost of living crisis top of mind. 2 federal sources tell the Canadian press the plan will aim to double some GST payments for 6 months, include help for Canadians struggling to pay rent, and launch the first step of a national dental care program. A one-time Canada housing benefit top-up and phasing in a national dental care program were pledged in April's budget and are key demands from the NDP in its confidence and supply agreement with the Liberals. Karen Rebo, the Canadian Press.
And Donald Trump's longtime ally Steve Bannon has surrendered to authorities in a New York court. He's expected to face charges that he duped donors who gave money to build a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. I am Damilola Unime. And for news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Another huge sighting for the Ottawa Senators, signing young center Tim Stützle to an 8-year, $66.8 million contract. 8 years, $66.8 million. As we welcome back from Sportsnet, getting ready for the hockey season, Kyle Bukauskas. Welcome back.
Great to be back, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm very excited, of course, as an Ottawa Senators fan. Gosh, talk about feast or famine. It seemed famine there for so long, losing star player after star player, seeing them sign with other teams. Erik Karlsson, Mark Stone, and on the list goes on. What a turnaround now for the Ottawa Senators. What do you think about this latest signing by the general manager?
I think it's a terrific move for the team. Obviously, it's a life-changing move for the player. Over $66 million, as you mentioned, over an 8-year span starting next season. I thought it was really beautiful. Stützle, speaking on local radio yesterday, saying, the first thing he wants to take care of is to make sure his parents don't have to work anymore. So that tells you how much family means to him. I think the fact that was kind of for now anyways, like the final piece of the Ottawa young core to get locked up long term. And if you're looking between Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, Thomas Chabot, Craig Batherson, and now Tim Stützle, none of them, Tim is the highest paid at just over 8.3, so none of them over the 8.5 threshold. And in a salary cap world where things are still relatively flat as the league comes out of the post-pandemic world here, that goes a long way and creates some more flexibility to add around that. And so you look at, again, the copycat mindset of this league and teams that have won cups in the past, the Colorados and the Tampas, as much as their star players are driving the bus, like they've got the ability to bring in some complementary pieces that aren't just filling roster spots, but are contributing and being significant players when the games matter the most. And the fact that they've got still some flexibility with regards to their salary cap and getting, their big names locked up to those relatively team-friendly numbers that have the ability to look, like bargains over the course of this term here, I think speaks a lot. Let's not forget Tim Stützle had there was no incentive. He didn't need to sign a contract before the season. He still has 1 year left in his entry-level deal. So he totally could have gambled on himself and looked at this lineup and said, well, this is the most talented group of players I've had a chance to play with yet in the NHL. I could pop off and be a point-a-game player next year and even drive up my price more than what he signed for yesterday. But he wanted the security. He believed in the vision of this organization. So, it's great for the player. It's a great sign for the team and great for the fans to know they've got, a player of Stützle's caliber locked up for the long haul.
But at 20 years old, just 20 years old, finished second with the Senators last year, 58 points in 79 games. At 20 years old, how risky is it to sign such a long-term contract for a 20-year-old player?
It's funny, it was very rare to see it in the past, don't you think, Rob? It was usually those generational type talents, the McDavids, the Crosbys, that you knew coming out of the first couple of years, they were going to get the big contract right out of the gate because they felt like sure things. And now you see more and more of the players that maybe traditionally would have gone the bridge route as the team kind of felt their players out a little more and say, okay, is this guy for real? Is he really worth the big money? More and more players get signed to the long-term deals now earlier on. And so I think, there's always going to be risk associated when you're, committing to a player for that long and that much money. But, if there's no team in the NHL knows Tim Stützle better than the Ottawa Senators do, they brought him in after drafting him in 2020, and you look at the projection that he's been on, it's been a climb. Certainly there's been some steps back along the way as he's adjusted to playing in this league over 82 games. But the fact that he was a point-a-game player over the final 35 games of last season, his move to center seemed to really transform him and allow him to exploit the middle of the ice and allow his skill to take over more often than not. There's going to be some growing pains still, no question about it. He'll go through some rough stretches, but as I say, this is a team that knows the player really well, that feels comfortable in committing to him. And again, as I alluded to earlier, now you've got Claude Giroux in the fold. You've got Alex DeBrincat in the fold. You've got way more talent around them smart players that can do a lot of damage offensively that he can play with and play off of. And so the fact that he's had some pretty special moments already in his first 2 years in a relatively losing environment, as this team tries to turn that corner and to win more often, the fact that he's got more weapons around him to help maximize his offensive potential and capabilities, I think it's a far better setup here going forward for him to put up even better numbers than he has already.
I remember when Erik Karlsson was no longer an Ottawa Senator, there was like a sense of mourning in the city to see such an electrifying player leave the club. And it was a trade, and this Tim Stützle is part of the legacy of that trade, right? So when you look back now with the power of hindsight, Kyle, who won the trade?
Yeah, I think it's looking better and better for the Senators, don't you think? Like, I think it'll probably, after, each of the players' careers are said and done, we'll really get a sense of who won the trade. But, certainly, yeah, Tim Stützle was the prized, non-lottery protected first-round pick that they got out of San Jose. And who else was part of that deal was Josh Norris, who at the time was kind of seen as, maybe at best a middle six type center, maybe a third line type player that could kill some penalties. I mean, the guy was on pace for 40 goals last year before he got hurt. And, there's no reason to expect why he couldn't get to that number this season, and just got paid earlier this summer too, right? So those two players alone, it certainly makes it easier to digest, doesn't it? I mean, maybe they got a little bit lucky in getting, Stützle out of that deal, because I don't think anyone anticipated the Sharks to fall off as quickly as they did, and for the draft pick that became Ottawa's to be as high as it ended up being. But good on for Pierre Dorion for doing the deal when he did, even though it wasn't a popular move at the time. But the organization believed it was time to go through a period of transition, and it brought a lot of tough nights, a lot of lean stretches where there wasn't much to be excited about. But as they kept selling and kept pushing, this was going to be the payoff down the road, right? So now they've got the young players locked up. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. We'll see what happens when the lights go on in October and how they look on the ice. But when you can go through a trade like that, and usually, the best player involved in the trade at the time, whoever gets that player usually ends up winning the trade. But in this situation here, the way the chips have fallen for Ottawa, and as the players have developed, it's looking more and more better for the Senators, and that's better for them as they continue to move into this next phase of their progression as an organization to be a winning franchise again.
So this huge deal will make Tim Stützle the highest paid player in the history of the Ottawa Senators. But we had the big deal for Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, Thomas Chabot, long-term deal for him. The Drake Batherson deal kind of looks like a screaming deal now. Are there any issues? You touched on this a little bit. Maybe you can expand on it. With the salary cap, are the Senators now... They must be getting close, I guess, by now with all of these big money deals, Kyle.
Getting closer, but not in any situation where they're in trouble or right up against it, or they got to start, trimming some fat just to get underneath by the time the regular season comes to an end. Like, again, if you look around the league and look at, some of the cores elsewhere, I think a lot of fans will look to Toronto first and foremost for a bevy of reasons. I mean, the amount of their core that's locked, I think, in terms of their group of core players, I think there's an extra $10 million versus Ottawa towards the cap on a seasonal basis. So to have that extra flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, for Ottawa is huge. It allows them to bring in some better complementary pieces. And I mean, now you've got, and we'll see as the Jake Sanderson era, begins here presumably this fall. It sounds like his wrist is better. He's ready for training camp, and so assuming he starts the year in the NHL and as a member of the Ottawa Senators and all the hype around him, he could be the next guy to command top dollar coming out of his entry level. So allowing room for someone like that to get his money and keep him around and be part of things as things move forward is huge. So you had to be, Pierre Dorion, the organization, they had to be patient. They had to dig their heels in when necessary to make sure they got the contracts done that worked with the organization long term and also satisfied the players. And I think as things have gone on here, as time has gone on here, you look at for what Tim Stützle signed, and as I mentioned, doing it with still a year left on his entry level, where in theory he could have played the year out and commanded a bigger number a year from now. It signals that I think the players see the direction this team is headed and want to be part of it, and they've done a lot of losing over the past couple of years here, and so if taking a contract that still makes them very handsomely paid, but allows a little more flexibility for the team, I think it just goes to show that their eyes are on winning, and they're sick of being a team that's out of the playoff mix by U.S. Thanksgiving.
Okay. Thank you so much for your insight this morning. Great to hear from you again.
Yeah, great to connect, Rob. Thanks for having me on. Let's do this again soon.
Sure thing. It's almost hockey season now. Kyle Bukauskas is with Sportsnet and part of the Hockey Night in Canada team as well. 11:16, Rob Snow Show, City News.
Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Our next guest is the president and CEO of a company called Maritime Launch. Maritime Launch Services says it is ready to build Canada's first commercial spaceport. Steve Matier joins me this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning.
When I first heard this idea, I thought it was crazy. You are going to build a spaceport in Nova Scotia, but tell me more about it.
Oh, thank you for the invitation to be here. Happy to. It's actually really an important aspect for the commercial space industry now that is really needing to find places to put all these satellites into orbit from. And this location in Nova Scotia on the tip of the peninsula serves exactly the right location where all these satellite clients want to put their satellites into orbit.
Okay. What makes it an ideal location?
Well, in following on from what I was just saying, there's the aspects of the satellite clients that really, really want this to happen, and most of the satellites today are not going into geosynchronous orbits around the equator. They're going into polar orbits, basically due south or due north, or in inclinations off of polar to be able to put all these constellations, as they call them, of satellites into orbit for global broadband, near-Earth imaging, Internet of Things, remote control of vehicles. So there's this huge demand for satellites to go into space, and we serve the locations really well for where they want to put them.
So it sounds like you'll be talking about the LEO-type satellites, low Earth orbit satellites. Is that right?
That is exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. And people are familiar with SpaceX and Starlink, though that involves low Earth orbit satellites, right? What other sort of companies are involved in that kind of space right now?
Well, from the idea of global broadband, there's our own Telesat, of course, and
Telesat, here in Ottawa. Sure. Yeah,
and OneWeb. Clearly, they've got a constellation they're working on. But it was just 5 or 6 weeks ago, Porsche announced a €3 billion investment plan to put a satellite constellation for remote control of vehicles in Europe. So it's almost every day, a day goes by and some new constellation is being announced. We've got Kepler there as well in Ottawa that's been putting smaller constellations into orbit, and MDA, of course, with their previous RadarSat-3 satellite. So there's actually a really robust satellite community in Canada already, and heretofore they've had to ship them south or other locations to be able to get them launched into orbit.
Okay. So what kind of services would you provide out of this spaceport? What would you do there for these companies?
We are the launch service provider, so we will provide the launch vehicle, the payload space, the control of public access, the access to space in collaboration with our federal partners at Transport Canada and NAV Canada. So basically it's running everything to take their satellites, put them into the vehicle, get them into space, and get them deployed where they want them, and then they take them back over for whatever their mission is with their satellites.
Okay, when I think, Nova Scotia, I'm from there. When I think about Nova Scotia, I don't necessarily think about rocket science, so to speak. But so, no disrespect to my friends and family back home, but what is it like trying to assemble a team and people with the appropriate skill set in a place like Canso, Nova Scotia?
Yeah, certainly it is a new experience for Canada at large and Atlantic Canada and Nova Scotia, yes. But, there are, more than half a dozen universities that have been building, model rockets and taking them down to the States and winning competitions on an annual basis for years. So there is a real depth of capability already in the country, and heretofore they're having to leave to go find employment if they want to stay in that field. But the other real important part, I think, it's to share is that the workforce required to operate a facility is mostly the trades kinds of things. There are technicians, electricians, mechanical technicians, information technology, environmental scientists, etc., plumbers, pipe fitters, and things that fit very well within technology and companies that are already doing similar kinds of work, just a little bit different. LNG fields, for example, here in Atlantic Canada. So most of the workforce at a site is really easy to populate. Yeah, we may bring in some expertise to help train up some of the other key positions, but at the end of the day, there's very few of those at the top end in the mission control.
Okay. We see governments, for example, here, the provincial government in Ontario, big plans to bring broadband to every community in Ontario. We hear similar things from other governments across the country, other provincial governments. Certainly the federal government wants to spend big money to try and solve the rural and remote connectivity problem. A lot of people think that's going to involve some kind of low Earth orbit solution. And you would seem to be well positioned here to take advantage of that. I'm wondering if you have had any government support.
The entire federal government, all of government, has been extremely supportive of us to date with respect to, the regulatory framework, global affairs with international treaties, ISED, Canadian Space Agency, et cetera. Across the board, there's a strong support and interest in what we're doing. And, to your point, I was up in the community of Canso in June, teaching in the classrooms, giving some opportunities to work with some kids up there. And it was interesting to see how many of these kids knew about Starlink and had internet in a rural area like Canso that was being provided by these global constellations that are going up. And, admittedly, the Starlink isn't extremely fast or timely at this point, but they're obviously putting up more and trying to improve it. And there are new players coming.
When you have no internet, though, when you have no internet, and then you put your Starlink on, it's like an eye-opening thing, right? So,
indeed it is.
Yeah. So the government's been supportive. Yes. That's good. Okay. Look, what's next for the company then?
Well, we have certainly had some significant momentum over the last 15 or so months with financing, and we went public in April, listed on the NEO Exchange under the ticker MAXQ. We got listed down in the States on an OTC market as well. We got our land lease signed here about 2.5 weeks ago for the 335 acres. We got a concurrence to start construction from Nova Scotia Environment, who supported all the environmental reviews and studies that we did. And just 2 days ago, formally started construction in a significant way out at the site, set up a trailer. We have teams out there working on the road access as we speak. So it's a real positive time for us with a really high tempo momentum going forward. We've got a phase 1 launch, if you will, a suborbital demonstration launch we're trying to work toward early next year. Now, this doesn't require a lot of infrastructure to succeed, to be able to perform that flight, but it is something that I think is very helpful for us from working with our federal partners on that regulatory piece, while we're working on the rest of the facility for the medium class launch capability that is able to put 5 tons of cargo into low Earth orbit from our launch location.
Cool. Good luck with it, sir. It's really exciting. I never thought you'd make it this far. Thank you. Okay.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Yeah. Maritime Launch Services out of Nova Scotia. Canada's first commercial spaceport is their plan. They do have shares. I don't own them. If you want to buy them, penny stock, right? Highly speculative stuff. 16.5 cents a share right now on the stock exchange. MAXQ. is the MAXQ ticker symbol. 11:29, Rob Snow Show, City News.
For local news in Ottawa and the Valley, this is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, September 8th. Good morning. I'm Alex Gouge. Right now in Ottawa, it's 22 degrees under mainly sunny skies. In Smith Falls, it's 23. Here's what's making news this hour. There are new concerns for Queen Elizabeth's health. A statement from Buckingham Palace says doctors are closely monitoring the Queen's condition and recommend she remain under a medical supervision. The 96-year-old monarch has suffered from mobility issues for more than a year and has been increasingly handing over her duties to Prince Charles, heir to the throne, and other members of the royal family. Prince Charles and his wife Camilla are with the Queen in Scotland, and other family members are on their way. The Jewish Federation of Ottawa is condemning a fashion video shoot that was held at the National Holocaust Monument. The Federation's CEO, Andrea Freeman, calling the video shoot an offensive desecration of the hallowed site. Freeman, in a release, says it is inappropriate to have people posing for bathing suits, photos, and videos, a site where people have to mourn, honor, and remember the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust. With the latest horrible disrespect of the site, coupled with recent hate crime statistics in the capital, Friedman says it demonstrates an urgent need for continued Holocaust education. Starting today, airlines will have to issue a full refund for cancellations and delays if passengers are not placed on a new flight within 48 hours. That includes for reasons outside of the airline's control. It's part of the new air passenger protection regulations being implemented as the Canadian Transport Agency tries to close a loophole that left some passengers unable to secure cash refunds after pandemic-related flight cancellations. As well as a cash refund, the ticket price may also be reimbursed through credit or vouchers and is to be paid in full by the airline within 30 days. City News Time, 11:33. I'm Alex Gouge. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's time for The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University, where he is Distinguished Senior Fellow. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Rob.
So it's all over the news. I have BBC in front of me right now, BBC News, and all her children are there. Her Majesty, the Queen, doctors concerned about her health, the family assembling at Balmoral, and there seems to be this sense of inevitability now about the Queen, 96 years old, and that the end may be near, sadly. So what sort of reaction would you expect from world leaders?
We're already getting reaction from all over the UK, starting with Scotland, where she is, which is governed by a party dedicated to separating itself to get out of the United Kingdom. And their leader has just sent good wishes and so forth. I think we should reflect a minute on the nature of the monarchy. This is a constitutional monarchy where monarchs reign, but they do not rule. So what will be their role? How can they remain relevant? Why are they even there? All those questions, I think, are about to be reopened upon the eventual demise of this queen. This queen, to move towards your question, I think through all of the domestic dramas, the international dramas of the UK, her family dramas, she has really reigned with grace for 70 years now. Her advice, apparently, including advice on foreign affairs, we assume, is apparently sought in private by every prime minister of the UK. So she has been a player without being a power in that sense. Her power comes from the grace with which she governs and how she has managed the monarchy. I think the question of the future of the Commonwealth will come up. As you possibly know, I'm a big fan of the Commonwealth, even though I know it's not a central institution. But the 56 member states crisscross the globe. She has led the Commonwealth. She's passed on leadership to her son, so that continuity will be there. The world, I think, will take note of the fact that an important international figure, somebody that has respect around the world, whatever happens to her. We should also keep in mind, by the way, her mother lived to be 101, although her father died at age 56 from a heart attack. So we aren't necessarily hearing an obituary here, but I think we should honor the fact that she has reigned with grace through this very long period.
Okay. And when you think about either her reign or the Commonwealth, is there, in say, terms of foreign policy or foreign affairs, is there a doctrine? You know, would you say that there's an Elizabeth II doctrine?
I think the style of her reign has affected the evolving nature of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth has continued to adapt to modernity. If you read what they say at their heads of government, it's really the leaders of all the countries that show up, and that's saying a lot. They adopt an agenda that often is a trendsetter, and the fact that the patronage of a highly regarded figure, such as the current Queen, makes the Commonwealth's stance and its role in the world more relevant.
What a life lived.
Yes.
Hey, Professor, can you imagine?
Yeah.
My gosh.
I'm a member of the Royal Commonwealth Society, Rob. I was recently truly honored to be given Queen's Jubilee Medal and certificate.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was actually for my role, long-time role on the Canadian Canada-Korea Society Board of Directors. So, as a contributor to civil society in Canada. But I was honored by that, and I normally shuffle these things off. But no, I felt really especially honored when that was pinned on my lapel.
Cool. All right. Let's get into some of our original topics before this really took over the news agenda this morning, because for many months now, you have been talking about the clear distinction in the world between democracy and authoritarianism. That there, you see the authoritarianism of Russia and China, and the counter, the democracy in the United States. But now there's great worry about the threat that Trump and MAGA Republicans represent to American democracy.
Right.
In a recent speech in Philadelphia, President Joe Biden said democracy's under assault. Quote, "We do ourselves no favor to pretend otherwise. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. There's no question the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. That is a threat to this country." How worried are you about the future of American democracy?
I'm I share the president's view on this matter. It's interesting that there was a recent poll that showed kind of a Venn diagram what voters care about. And among Democrats and independents, the number one concern was the future of democracy, even over inflation. And by the way, nobody picked up on this. For the Republicans, it was, we want to impeach Joe Biden. So I think the assault on American democracy, which was most vividly put on display with the assault on the Capitol, which was egged on, and we're all watching this January 6th hearing, there's no question that the sitting president wanted to do something extraordinary. He did not want to accept his electoral defeat. He wanted to overturn the results of an election. There was an incitement to violence. Now, whether he can be personally blamed for that or not, that's up to the court. But in the court of public opinion, it seems pretty clear. The undermining of the institutions of America continues. The U.S. Congress, the night of the assault of January 6th, a significant number of the Republican members of Congress then voted to support the sitting president's viewpoint that he had actually won the election and that the power should not be, for the first time in American history, passed peacefully from one president to another based on who won the election. That kind of act alone would be worrisome, but the fact that the dominance of the MAGA Republicans, and I think we should comment on that for a moment.
Go ahead.
The President of the United States made a clear distinction between Republicans and MAGA Republicans. So he's saying it isn't every Republican, it's just those who want to deny the peaceful transfer of power due to an electoral loss and to deny the rightful presidency, of the winner. Those are the ones we have to worry about. And they are on the ballot up and down the midterm elections. They're in governorships and, in fact, prospectively in the presidency going forward for the next election. But up and down the ballot all across America, there are people on the ballot who are election deniers and who, Rob, will be in charge of overseeing the next election if they are elected. So we have a Supreme Court that has, let's say, lost a lot of public favor for what it seems to be having reactionary activists there. So the Supreme Court is being undermined. The FBI now, because of Mar-a-Lago, is being assaulted. So the MAGA assault on the institutions that sustain American democracy does seem to be credible, does seem to be real, and that is a genuine worry.
Okay. A few months ago, just sticking with the situation in the United States right now, a few months ago it seemed that the Democrats were going to be crushed in the midterms. Right. It was bleak. But now pollsters are saying, they may have turned it around, with a big turning point being the ruling on Roe v. Wade. Major turning point. Energized female voters all across the country, even in red states. There was the student loan relief package. And then you have all of these problems that, as you outlined, are hurting Trump. January 6th committee hearings, the continued reporting about the seizures at Mar-a-Lago, all the information that they're finding out about that. So have the Democrats turned this race around on the Republicans? What's your sense of things, Professor?
Things have been shaken up. Have they been turned around? We should focus in on what we're talking about, and that is primarily the enthusiasm gap, Rob.
Okay.
The
enthusiasm gap. Okay.
In American politics, the tradition is that the party that wins the election for president tends to do poorly in the next midterms, which is where we are now. And, of course, the Democrats won. And the reason for that is that the people who elected successfully their president tend to not turn out in such numbers. Elections are won by people who show up to vote, one of Tepper's maxims on election watching. So the enthusiasm gap here is what you look at because, for reasons you've just pointed out, maybe the Democrats will turn around the historic almost once or twice it's changed after 9/11, but basically the historic tendency to lose may be affected by what you've been talking about. The question is how much, and I've been looking at this. The typical loss is about 32 seats or so.
Right.
But Obama, having saved America and from a global depression to save the world, lost about 64 seats in the House. The Democrats really did lose the House, it looked like, not next time, but last time. In the last election cycle, Democrats thought they would pad their majority, Rob, in the House. It would go up significantly, and they were going to take a number of governorships, which in turn oversees the electoral boundaries, who gets to vote and where in the next election. And the Democrats lost on all of those. They went down. So they do not have a comfort margin, a padding. So the way it looks today is, yes, it's entirely possible that the Democrats, which were expected to be swamped, they may not be swamped, but they almost certainly will not pick up enough seats to overcome the narrowness of their present majority. The Republicans are almost certainly going to take the House.
We'll stop here for now. This is The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University's Norman Patterson School of International Affairs on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
The BBC is reporting now that William is on his way to Balmoral from the Aberdeen airport. Prince William, and that is the latest that we have on that. As we welcome back Professor Elliot Tepper, Norman Paterson School International Affairs at Carleton University. Meantime, there's a new Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
Well, maybe we should close off on U.S. politics.
Sure thing.
About
yeah,
the House,
Professor. Yep.
Not the Senate. So the impact, which was your point, what about the mega impact on the future of America, is that the Senate candidates are viewed by Mr. McConnell, who cares a great deal. He wants to be majority leader in the Senate again. He's saying, basically, because of the influence of Trump, weak candidates have been put up. So he can dominate, Trump can dominate the primaries, but the people who put up then may not be electable in a general election. And that's where we are in terms of that particular balance. It's 50-50 now. There's a good chance that the Democrats have at least a shot of maintaining their majority in the Senate. If not, then the future of American politics with Joe Biden in the White House and Republicans dominating both houses under MAGA influence of Congress, America's democracy is indeed, I think, looking, well, let's keep a close eye on it.
Keeping a close eye on it. Okay. It's always big news when there's a new prime minister in the United Kingdom. Unveil it's hard to imagine the sum of money involved here, £200 billion sterling energy relief plan today, more than the United Kingdom spends in a year on health care. Liz Truss, pro-Brexit, opposed to a windfall tax on energy companies, insulted Francis Macron during the leadership race, said something along the lines of, well, is he really a friend of ours or not? I don't know what she was getting at there. Probably a Brexit thing. Inherits sagging Tory poll numbers, double-digit inflation, a war in Europe. You wonder why anyone would want the job. But you did not have kind things to say about Boris Johnson the last time we spoke, so is this a case of meet the new boss, same as the old?
Well, it's a different person. And let's start on the positive side on this.
Okay.
The cabinet that got appointed was extraordinary. We commented on this a couple weeks ago or last week when the race was still on, that the top contenders really were remarkably diverse. So we talked about the Commonwealth. This cabinet that just got appointed by Liz Truss really reflects the Commonwealth itself. The diversity of the United Kingdom's population is far better represented in this cabinet than any before, and that includes prospectively, if Labour comes to power, this cabinet will be more diverse and be more notable for its diversity. For the first time, all of the power positions, and this is the big headlines in the news, are not held by white men. No white men will occupy any of the four great offices of state: Prime Minister, I would also add Deputy Prime Minister, Treasury, Foreign Office, and Home Affairs, all occupied by women or persons of color. I was very interested in one of them, in particular, Suella Braverman, has taken over as Home Secretary, a real power position. She's apparently a Buddhist. I haven't seen the background, but I suspect a Sri Lankan background originally. The Chancellor of the Exchequer is really... he's got background for the role. All these people have backgrounds that make him eligible, but he himself comes apparently from an African background. There's Muslim in the cabinet or two. So all of this says that it's a very interesting cabinet. I also was watching for who was going to be defense, and she kept Ben Wallace as defense secretary, and I think, among other things, he's competent, but it's a huge thank you to him for not running, because had he put his name forward, he was the leading choice among party favorites at the time, so he possibly would have been elected. We might be talking about him today otherwise.
Okay. Vladimir Putin, in a speech this week, said, "We will not supply gas, oil, coal, heating oil. We will not supply anything. The only thing we can do is to keep on saying the line from a well-known Russian fairy tale, right. Freeze, freeze, the wolf's tail." This is if Brussels, so the EU, adopted a proposed price cap on Russian gas. Your thoughts, please.
Yes, he called it stupid, and said, if you do that, I'm cutting off all
everything.
Gas supplies. Yeah. This was Mr. Putin reacting to the idea that this price cap should be explained a bit. The notion here is that the world's not going to stop buying energy supplies from Russia just because of the nature of the world today, but there's an agreement not to pay very much for it. They'll put a cap on it, which would reduce the income going into Russia's war machine, because right now the war machine is still being funded primarily through sales of energy successfully. So I think that's what's going on. The UK in particular, since we were talking about it, has said we are finding a way to get around our dependence, and they are not as dependent on Russian energy supplies. That's both oil and gas. 40% of Europe's energy supply comes right now, at the start of this conflict, from Russia. You and I have talked a lot about that. Germany has just made a key announcement saying, we are prepared, we are ready, we can handle this if necessary, because we have diversified our supply. We now have more sources of the kind of energy that we have been using, and we are swiftly shifting to new types of energy. So what we have now, I think, is a grand reorganization of Europe. We've talked about this before. They're not going to be dependent in the future on Russia no matter what, and Russia has been dependent on Europe. This is an interdependence, but Russia, of course, can always sell energy at a discount. China's buying as much as he'll sell, so is India. So we are in a different kind of world, a reorganizing world. But meanwhile, the war in Ukraine goes on.
Okay. We will have to end it there for this week. We'll see where things stand next week in this complicated world of ours. Thank you, Professor.
Oh, you're very welcome, Rod. Always good to chat with you.
Yeah, Professor Elliot Tepper, Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton. That's it for the Rob Snow Show. Sam LaPrade is ready and raring to go. Sam LaPrade Show right after the 1 o'clock news. Back tomorrow right after the 9 o'clock news. Friday free for all tomorrow. Hope to hear from you at 750-1310 here on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays at 9 on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
I'm Mike.
Closed captioning is brought to you